Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan from Chess Gyaan, and this is a partnership between Chess Gyaan and Follow Chess where we are bringing out chess content for the next 20 days. And yesterday also we released a video and a game on Grandmaster Isaac Bololevsky. So today we are going to be talking about Grandmaster Efim Geller. So the series is aimed at 21 great players who were exceptionally talented but never got the ultimate crown of being a chess player, which is the World Championship title. So today, as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about Grandmaster Efim Geller. Let's have a brief look at who he is and what his achievements are. The most important achievement of Grandmaster Efim Geller was the fact that he was a candidate 6 times for the World Championship, and also he coached 2 future world champions who were Boredom and Anatoly Karpov. Though he never really became the world champion, he managed to become the world senior champion, and these are the most important achievements of Grandmaster Efim Geller. So today we are going to be seeing one of his games that he played against another USSR Grandmaster named Lev Polugaevsky, who is also very famous, and he has contributed theoretically. There is the Polugaevsky variation and so on. And this game that we are going to be looking at was played in 1961 in Moscow. So white started with e4, c5, knight f3, d6. So we have a knight off on the board, and white decides to go for the open knight off, like knight c takes d4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6. And white, as we all know, white has a lot of options here, and in this game white decides to go bishop e2. And Grandmaster Geller was a very faithful follower of this setup, as if you check his database, more or less every single game that reached the a6 position, he went bishop e2. And when I was looking at bishop e2 and was looking at a player from that time frame, somewhere around 1960, maybe 70s, 80s, I also saw that there was Grandmaster Sergei Dolmatov, who had played a lot of games with bishop e2. So in case if you want to understand how the theory developed back in the days, in maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up to 2000, I would suggest you can check Grandmaster Geller and Grandmaster Grandmaster Dolmatov's game to get an understanding about this opening. So black replied with e5. So Polugaevsky, in this game he went e5, but later on, like few years later, he more or less completely shifted to playing only e6 for bishop e2. So for e5, white decided that he should be going knight b3. And another option for white instead of knight b3 would be knight f3. So there is also a lot of theory behind knight f3, and knight b3 is the most popular move. So there is a connection between the game that the Grandmaster whose game we saw yesterday, Grandmaster Isaac Bololevsky. In that game, Bololevsky was very famous for this d5 weakness over here, which is considered the Bololevsky whole kind of pawn structure. And so here black has played e5 here and given that weak square on the d5 and wants to play around the d5 weakness. So black replies bishop e7, white short castles, and here there's an option for black, which is to go bishop e6, and if f4, go queen c7, f5, bishop c4, and there's a lot of games and a lot of theory that you can learn in this particular position. Instead of this, black decides to short castle over here, and white plays bishop e3. So in this position, bishop e3 is a major decision in my opinion, because white also have options like bishop to g5, or white can also play a4. So if bishop g5, either black will go knight b d7 and try to, if bishop f6, capture back with knight f6, or he will play bishop e6, preparing to go knight b d7. So these are the two options that black would play for bishop g5. If a4, the idea is to kind of clamp down the queen side and then slowly, increase the pressure on the central squares. That would be white's plan. So for bishop e3 in this position, black replied queen c7 and white went queen d2. So the only piece yet to be developed is the rook, and that also we can very much expect some rook a d1 or so in the next few moves. Black goes bishop e6, and this move in 1961 was a new move. No one had ever played this move before, but I don't know if it was a novelty, I mean like a prepared novelty, or was it just a natural move that was never played before. So bishop e6, here white played f4 in the game, but I believe f4 is not so precise in comparison to a4 or knight d5. So if knight d5, bishop takes d5, e takes d5, knight b d7, c4, and black will go b6, with one idea being knight c5 directly, or possibly black wants to go knight e4 and put this knight to c5 and then go f5 and play on the center and on the king side. So this is a plan that black has in this position. So instead of knight d5, in case if white goes a4, black would go knight b d7, white would go a5, rook a c8, and here, as there's a lot of pressure on the c2 pawn, and white at some point would like to remove the c3 knight from and go on maybe knight d5 or knight a4 kind of, it makes a lot of sense for white to go rook fc1, a bit unnatural square for the rook to go to c1, because normally it will go to e1 or d1. But as I mentioned, the reason being white wants to support c2. And why does white want to keep the rook on a1? To learn why white wants to keep the rook on a1, I would strongly suggest you to go and check the game Karpov, Anatoly Karpov versus Lajos Portish from London 1982, which reached the same exact position, and where white later went on to play moves like rook a4, rook b4, and create play with this the rook on a file. So you can learn how to play these setups if you look at that game. So instead of both these options, white went f4, which in my opinion is slightly dubious. And here black should have played knight b d7, which and for knight b d7, if white goes f5, black will go bishop c4, and if white tries to go for an attack, black has the thematic d5 break on the center of the board, and if e takes d5, black will go bishop b4, and now a lot of threats like knight takes d5 or knight e4 and so on is all on the board. And also instead of e takes d5, if white played something like g5, black can consider playing moves like d4 and lead to a very sharp and complex position. So after e takes d5, bishop b4, if d6, there is queen c6, bishop takes c4, queen takes c4, and if g5, black can play bishop c3, bc3, queen g4 check, and then knight e4 is an idea. And I personally like black's position a lot, because white's pawn are very weak, like this pawn here, and if the queens get exchanged and if we go to an endgame, most likely all the weak pawns that I have marked would fall, and black would just be having a big advantage. So black should have played knight b d7, but black decided to go ef4, which in my opinion is a mistake. The reason being, one is that it allows white to generate a lot of play on the f file, and the other reason being it allows this maneuver knight d4 to knight f5, and then white can generate a lot of attack on the black king. So that's the big problem. So as I just mentioned, that white will play on the f file. For ef4, it's a very natural reaction would be to take with the rook and not the bishop, because when you take with the rook, you're also threatening to at some point go rook a f1 and generate more and more play on the f5. So for rook f4, black should play knight c6. So the difference between this knight c6 and the move that was played in the game, which is knight b d7, is that when you go knight c6, you do take control of the square. So if white goes knight d4, you can possibly think of even playing knight takes d4 and going knight d7, knight e5 and so on. That would be the big difference between knight d7 and knight c6. And in case for knight c6, if white goes rook a f1, then black can go knight d7. That's another big advantage of playing the knight to c6, the fact that you kept the d7 square empty, and your knight on f6 can go to d7. And if knight d5, you can capture bishop d5, e d5, knight c e5. And it's kind of tough for white to really generate attack here, because I feel this knight is in a very strong outpost, well protected by the other knight, and in worst case black will be able to play some sort of rook e8, bishop f8, g6, bishop g7, and completely keep the king side defended. And also always black will have ideas like d5, a5, and create counter chances on the queen side. So knight b d7 was played instead of knight c6, and white decided to go knight d4, knight e5. So always rook a f1 is an option that white can play anytime, and Geller decided to wait for that for a few more moves. So first he went knight f5. So it's a very tricky question, like which bishop to give. I mean, like white is white really threatening to take knight e7 is another question, or is white just wants to keep the knight on f5 and just keep the threat alive but don't want to capture on e7. So what would happen if black plays bishop f5 is the other question, or should black give the e7 dark squared bishop instead of the light color squared bishop? So this is a big question for black to answer, and I feel normally it would not be advisable to play bishop takes f5, because then there's always rook takes f5 and then some sort of rook f6 exchange sack and knight d5, and white would get more than enough compensation for the exchange sacrificed. But in this particular position, I feel bishop f5 is justified, because if rook f5, queen c6, and white has to play some sort of bishop d3 to defend the e4 pawn, and black can play some b5 or bishop d8, bishop b6, kind of try to exchange the dark squared bishop, or go rook a8 followed by bishop d8 and so on, and black is able to create some ideas and defend. But even then still I would certainly prefer white slightly, because it's very easy to find moves for white. Rook a f1, king h1, somewhere g4, g5, you want to go maybe bishop d4 or bishop g5, and the moves are so natural that you don't even have to really calculate much playing the white pieces. So in the game for knight f5, black went rook a c8, which is also an okay move, nothing wrong about it, and white went rook a f1. So with this, officially white has completed development of all his pieces, and I really like the placement of white's pieces. I mean, they're all on active squares, maybe except for the bishop on e2. Every piece all have at least an active potential, even if they are currently not an active square. So for rook a f1, I was looking at this position, and my first thought was like, can black counter attack with, let's say, b5? And it led me to a very deep think, and I found this interesting variation, which is, let's say, b5 if knight takes g7, and if king g7, there's always rook takes f6, bishop f6, and then bishop h6 check. And if king g6, you have rook takes f6, king f6, queen g5 mate. And in case for if king g7, rook f6, bishop f6, bishop h6, king h8, you can play even moves like bishop takes f8, and black needs to be very careful. For knight g7, instead of king g7, black can play b4, which I think is more critical. So for b4, if knight takes e6, that is b takes c3, knight takes c7, c takes d2, and a very interesting move, which is rook takes f6, bishop f6, knight d5. And here the material that white has is bishop and pawn for the exchange that he has given up, but I feel like certainly white has enough compensation, but nothing more, just enough compensation. And another option for white is, instead of knight takes e6, white can play knight d5, which would lead to bishop takes d5, e takes d5, king takes g7, rook f6, bishop f6, bishop h6, king g8, and rook takes f6. Looks a bit scary for black, but I feel black should be able to defend, because black has moves like queen takes c2, and he can create his own checks on the white king on the first rank. So this was b5, variation which did not occur in the game, but an analysis variation. And another option for black would have been bishop takes f5, which I think would have been a better move than playing b5 directly, because this removes the knight takes g7 sacrifice possibilities. And after rook f5, now play b5. And the point being, if a3 stopping b4, and black goes queen b7, threatening to take on knight takes e4, white goes queen d4, and black can go rook f e8, and black's key ideas would be something like bishop d8, rook e6, defend this f6 knight, and then kind of go bishop b6 at the right moment or so. And really there is not a very clear way how white can keep his attack going, and this knight on e5 is doing a tremendous job on e5. So this is what I think would have been the best continuation for black. Instead, black went rook f e8, which is the start of all his future problems in this game, in my opinion. So here for rook f e8, white went bishop d4. White could have tried knight takes e7, queen e7, and given a solid exchange sack for positional and structural compensation. After gf6, white has bishop f2, threatening bishop h4. So black can go king h8, and after bishop h4, go knight d7. And when white goes queen d4, black has a very nice defensive resource, in my opinion, and that is queen d8. The whole point being, if rook takes f6, black just goes queen b6 and forces a queen trade. And in case white decides to go king h1, now queen b6 would not be so great, because white can play bishop takes f6 with a check, and then black cannot take knight f6 because the queen is hanging. And if king g8, white can kind of play queen d2 and try to go queen g5 and so on, and black's king is in some danger. So instead of queen b6 for king h1, black can go rook g8, and after rook takes f6, then he can go queen b6. If rook f6 we play here, he has queen b6 ideas, and now black is doing okay. So instead of rook f6, if white takes queen d6, white has bishop and pawn for the exchange, and enough compensation, because at some point for sure white will also pick up the f6 pawn. But I believe black, when white picks up the f6 pawn, black will be able to exchange the queens and have a playable position. So the variation we were just looking at was in this position. It is knight e7 with an exchange sacrifice, which was not played, but white played bishop to d4. So white is just creating some threats down this diagonal, and also is opening up this diagonal. So in case of white, the rook moves, white can immediately jump queen g5 or so and create some attack. So black went bishop f8, which is a big mistake in my opinion, because instead of bishop f8, if knight f d7, queen e1, bishop f6, king h1, king h8, and queen g3, white does have an attack. I mean, all the white pieces are optimally placed, but black seems to be defending well. I mean, the four minor pieces clearly are doing a fantastic job, but the only issue for black is that none of those minor pieces can really move, because if they do move, then they run into some problems for black. So black's idea would be to play some sort of queen d8, I guess, and go b5 and try to play down the c file. Technically it's an uncleared position, but easier to play for white. Instead of knight f d7, which is the suggestion, black went bishop f8, and this is a mistake, because white has a nice tactical shot which Geller did not play. It's just knight takes g7, bishop g7, rook f6, bishop f6, rook f6. And if king h8, white can go bishop d3, and white's plan is to go queen f2 and possibly go queen h4 and go knight d5 and attack on h7, h6, and this diagonal is also a problem for black, and so on. So, but I'm kind of not sure why Geller decided not to play a move that looks very logical and sacrifice the exchange. He instead went bishop d3, black went knight f d7, rook h4, and here black made another mistake. So this is the third do mistake we are seeing in the game by black in the last, I think, 5-6 moves. And after this, the position kind of quickly collapses. I think the best move for black would have been queen d8, but the mistake Geller made was, sorry, not Geller, Grandmaster Lev Polugaevsky made was knight g6. If queen d8, the point of this move is you are trying to bring your queen, black's queen, closer to the king. And as anyway, the queen on c7 was not generating any play or threat down the c file, and also now with bishop being on d3, the c2 pawn is well protected. So even if you do go b5, b4 with the queen being on c7, the c2 pawn is not hanging. So it does make more sense to at least let the rook play on the c file, because at least rook will have some rook takes c3 exchange sack if needed at some point, or rook c5 ideas, and something that the rook can do better than the queen, because the queen does not have any active role on the c file. And if the queen being on d8, it can try somewhere closer to the king, maybe not queen f6 right away, because then there will be some knight h6 check and you would lose the queen. But in general, the queen, can control this critical g5 square, and always there is some defensive resource where the queen can come in. So I feel queen d8 would have been a better move. Logical variation how the game could have continued for queen d8 is rook h3, g6, knight h6 check, bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, and black can go b5. So the dark squares are weak, but they are well blockaded by this knight, so white cannot really take advantage of it. And if white goes something like knight d5 or so, black would just capture bishop d5, e d5, and play then maybe queen c7 back, or he would go rook c7, or at some point knight takes d3 and the other knight may come to e5 and so on. So this would have been the most sensible move for black to play. Instead, black went knight g6, rook h3, knight d5. The problem with this knight setup is who is going to defend this h7 pawn. When the knight was on d7, there was always a possibility to go knight f6 or knight f8 and defend the h7 in case it's attacked. Whenever h7 is attacked, black cannot really go h6, because white will always have some threats like knight takes h6 and sacrifice on h file and open up the position. And the other question is, what is the knight doing on g6? I mean, it has no active threats. It would certainly be a better knight setup to keep the knight here and here instead of keeping the knights on e5 and g6. And white realizes that, and white plays queen d1. He's immediately threatening to go queen h5 and exploit the drawback of knight d e5. So here black's best bet would have been to kind of go back knight e7, accept his mistakes, and say that if you go queen h5, now I'll play h6, and if you go bishop e3 threatening to sacrifice on h6, I can play g6, and if knight takes h6, bishop takes h6, queen h6, bishop h3, queen h3, black's position is in danger, but at least he's not like losing or anything. White certainly has the initiative and attack for him going. The key idea of knight e7 is that you want to go g6 and bishop g7. If you put the bishop on g7, then the black king will generally feel more safer, because there's a minor piece standing right in front of the king. That's the idea why you want to go knight e7. But black plays a very surprising move that makes very less logic. He plays on the queen side with b5. I mean, too late, trying to get a counterplay on the queen side, as white has already well positioned all his pieces aiming at the black king. So white goes queen h5, h6, and here knight d5 is bishop takes d5, e d5, knight d3, c d3, and you will see a very similar continuation to like this in the game, where white played rook g3 instead of knight d5. And after rook g3, black goes king h7, because one big idea for white could be to take on e5 and then give an exchange sack on g6 and so on. So black just goes king h7 and white goes knight d5, exploiting the fact that now if this pawn is not on e4, then this bishop becomes very strong. So he's forcing black to play bishop takes d5, e takes d5, knight takes d3, and c takes d3. So looks like we have got two minor pieces exchanged. Black may feel safe, but the problem is still white has all his pieces attacking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and right now only this and knight on g6 and bishop on f8 are the ones defending. So 5 pieces attacking and only 2 defending. Clearly a mismatch in attackers and defenders. So unless if black can bring more defenders to save the king, he's just going to get uh, I mean he'll be attacked brutally by white. Queen b7 was played by black, threatening to take on d5, and white played a nice, I would say, like a tiny little prophylactic move. It was king h1. The point being, if queen takes d5 is played, knight g7. If the king was on g1, this would not have happened because black could have had queen takes d4 with a check. That's the whole point why when white went king h1 here. The point being, if queen d5, knight g7, and if queen takes h5, knight takes h5, and then knight f6 check is threatened, rook takes f7 is threatened, black can very well resign in this particular position. So for king h1, black goes rook c2, white plays knight e3, and knight e3 is not the only winning move. If you see other winning moves in this position also, there is as pretty much there is any like logical move gives white an advantage, not just knight e3. So knight e3, rook d2, and white goes knight g4. So the idea of knight e3 was to regroup the knight and possibly now sacrifice on h6, g7, everything, and it's a big threats are coming up. And also because the knight is on g4, white can also threaten to play like rook f3 and rook f7 kind of moves. Earlier when the knight was on f5, the f file was blocked, so that is also an additional good thing of knight e3, knight g4. So black goes queen d7 and white decides to play h4. So two ways I can look at it. One is safely clearing the back rank so that the rook on f1 can now freely move, as there's always king h2 if there's any check on the first rank. And the other good thing about h4 is at some point I think white can try to move his queen away and play h5 and dislodge the knight away from g6. So it has a bit of an offense and defense ideas combined, why h4 was played. So instead of h4, white could have also simply played queen takes h6 and gone knight f6 check and win some material. But instead h4, queen e7, and white goes rook e3, black goes queen d7, and now queen takes h6 comes. And if g h6, as I've already mentioned, knight f6 check followed by knight takes d7, and then the rook on e8 is also hanging. So black played king g8 in the game, and white just played rook takes e8. And now black resigned because if he captures queen e8, white can play queen takes d2 and be a full rook up. And so black realized that there's nothing better to do here, so black resigned in this particular position. So this game, I really liked it from a perspective that black kind of lost his way around move 15 to 20. He was playing, moving his knights front and back without a clear idea. He had to make some decisive move. He should have either played bishop takes f5 or b5 a bit early, but instead he was just trying to maneuver his pieces around. But at the same time, white perfectly, brought all his pieces to the king side and generated a very strong and powerful attack. So that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this game. And other than that, what else we can learn from this game? I would clearly say that the ef4 decision, and you can kind of understand something over here, that after e takes f4, the d4 square, how white managed to get back control of that. So that's a very big decision. So if you're considering to take ef4 in similar positions, then you should always consider, can white go knight d4, knight f5 and create some problems for me? If so, then why should I play e takes f4? You can leave it as it is, because white is not most likely going to play fe5, because fe5 de5, then this bishop becomes active on e7 and d file gets open, so you can play some rook d8 and attack the white queen and so on. So generally white would play f5 g4 kind of idea as an attack and not play f takes e5. So these are the main takeaways for me from this game, and I hope you enjoyed the session, the lecture on Grandmaster Efim Geller, and I hope everyone is also staying safe from the virus and following all the government guidelines on how to stay safe. So this is Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan, and this is a 21 game series that is being done by Chess Gyaan Academy, my academy, and Follow Chess in partnership with the Follow Chess app. So this game can be seen through the Follow Chess app, and also if you want to see the lecture part alone, you can visit the Chess Gyaan YouTube channel. The video is uploaded over there. So yesterday we talked about Grandmaster Isaac Polugaevsky, and today we talked about Grandmaster Efim Geller. So tomorrow you can expect a different Grandmaster, and we'll be discussing his game. So everyone stay safe and bye bye.